The Muppets are an interesting property, to say the least. In an era where properties like the Smurfs and Alvin and the Chipmunks and even Chippendale are getting revamped for a modern audience, the Muppets have surprisingly maintained their persona through many revitalizations in TV, movies, and most recently streaming over a span of nearly 50 years. To this day, the Muppets, whether you like them or not, remain one of those icons that not only can you instantly recognize, but chances are when you see them come to life, they remain exactly how your memory would entail them to act. And yet, their recent incarnations have failed to swoon a massive audience the way that most would expect outside of nostalgia for previous entries, something that 2011's reboot managed to successfully bank on to relaunch the franchise, but that success came to a screeching halt with the diminishing returns from the sequel and several of the Disney Plus ventures slipping up in the lily pad.
I'm gonna shoot straight. You guys aren't famous anymore.
Have the Muppets lost their flavor as of late, or has the bar been set too high for them to reach? First thing to understand is the difference between bigger or better and larger in scale, or as Hollywood should but doesn't seem to perceive it as, sleeker in style. Whenever a franchise gets a reboot, most of the time it's with a more polished production given by a larger budget, which Hollywood seems to think makes it better for whatever reason, which seems to make the writers think that they can write whatever they want without worrying about staying true to the source material or understanding what audiences want out of an adaptation. Thankfully, we only saw this venture once with the Muppets, thanks to the people who can't seem to get the Sinister Six right, and even then, the personalities of the characters seem intact, just with a misunderstanding of how to use them. Other than that, though, the Muppets have remained in their cocoon of simple, pleasant storytelling backed up by silly humor delivered by its continuing to be charming characters. But unlike the other attempts at rebooting franchises, for a while the idea of the Muppets venturing into other avenues was more along the lines of challenging the creators, experimenting with the different mediums of storytelling rather than simply giving them a bigger budget. That sounds like it would be a better and more engaging method of storytelling, but then why haven't they been able to find traction with today's audiences? When The Muppet Show and the first Muppet movie came out, even over at Disney, a film cracking even $100 million at the box office was extremely rare, so the Muppets having box office results that they had at the time was considered reasonable. Since then, however, the definition of a massive hit, even in the family genre, has changed significantly, with films like Lion King, the Shrek franchise, the Despicable Me franchise, and so on, continuing to break records and setting all kinds of new standards in executives' eyes. And yet, as much as many of us remember growing up with films like Muppet Treasure Island, for instance, the Muppets never caught up with such box office hits, mostly keeping them in niche markets, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, except maybe to the studio that currently owns them. It's no secret that Disney has been turning into the corporate machine that they typically taunt in their Disney Channel movies, buying up every franchise that they can turn into a mega million lottery winner and exploiting the daisies out of them. The Muppets were on their balance sheet long before the buyout of Marvel and Star Wars, though, back when they were in the entertainment business and not necessarily the money business, hence classics such as Muppet Christmas Carol and, again, Muppet Treasure Island. Now that they are in the money business, it's become harder for them to decide how to move forward with a cast of characters that were hits before hits really became hits, as they found out when they gave too high of a budget to the moderate flop Muppets Most Wanted. In today's family movie market, the Muppets, at least the way that they are, don't have too huge of a place, at least not the place that Disney might want for one of their franchises. They're less like a multi-million-dollar franchise like Despicable Me or Trolls, and more along the lines of stop-motion films, which thanks to streaming services like Netflix have managed to find a maintainable market. Perhaps if they... Oh, wait. They tried that too. Muppets Haunted Mansion and The Muppets Now didn't quite leave the dent in pop culture that something like The Mandalorian or Stranger Things left, despite The Muppets Now probably being the best way to translate the format of the original Muppet Show to today's generation. They both just kind of came and went. So how exactly are the Muppets going to leave the dent that Disney is looking for? The only way that I can see the Muppets possibly connecting outside of the niche audience is a total revamp of the characters, but the problem is that anything that Hollywood, especially Disney, will try, I can already tell you, aren't going to connect with any audiences, let alone the masses. I'd hate to fathom what the Muppets would look like in a photorealistic CG format, for instance. I feel dirty just bringing that up, but we already know Disney would try it. Honestly, there's no way to win in this case. Either the presentation of the characters would have to change in their entirety to fit the flashy family entertainment format, or the Muppets would have to remain the niche entertainment they've always been. But really, nothing's wrong with the latter as long as they don't overspend on their projects. The Muppet movies and shows weren't great because they were big and flashy. They were great because they were pleasant little stories with pleasant little characters. They managed to be iconic and charming without the need for photorealistic details or wild, extravagant energy. Like I said, niche stop-motion films like Pinocchio and Marcel work the same way and therefore need to be treated with the same level of modesty. When films like Muppets from Space or Muppets Most Wanted throw in these big, flashy effects, they don't work as well because they're trying to be mega blockbusters when the Muppets were never meant to be mega blockbusters, but rather mini escapism. Something that they're allowing Winnie the Pooh to coast on, so why not the Muppets too? And no, adding flashy effects doesn't count as the challenge for the creators that I mentioned earlier. Everyone knows that the computer effects is the fix-it-and-post cop-out when the ambition isn't already there in the production phase. These creators need to challenge themselves storytelling-wise without taking these characters out of their element. Then maybe, just maybe, we'll find that rainbow connection that we've been longing for.